Welcome to Climate Youth News at COP. We bring you news from the 27th World Climate Change Conference in Egypt and provide you with the most important information of the day, the latest developments, and voices from the field. We start with our first contribution on the topic of the day.
This morning, a third draft of the potential cover decision for COP27 was published. With a total of 10 pages, it reaffirms the 1.5 target but remains vague on many other issues. For 3 topics, the text even refers to a placeholder for relevant outcomes from ongoing negotiations, suggesting that many agreements are still pending if they are reached at all. Regarding finance, the COP highlights that global climate finance flows are small relative to the overall needs of developing countries. It says that delivering the necessary funding will require transformation of the financial system, engaging governments, banks, and other financial actors. Unfortunately, the text fails on establishing a new quantified goal on climate finance beyond 2025. Instead, it simply urges developed countries to enhance financial resources, technology transfer, and capacity building for developing countries. It also encourages other parties to provide such support voluntarily. This could be a hint to China, which is defined as a developing country since the Rio Conference, but is a big emitter of greenhouse gases now, 30 years later. Interestingly, the text also calls on financial actors to reform their practices and priorities. Namely, multilateral development banks and international financial institutions are called to triple their climate finance till 2025, but without exacerbating debt burdens. How will credits without debts be possible? Furthermore, the decisions at COPs are only binding for member states. They will have to hold the banks accountable. All in all, the draft highlights that public grants would have high social returns. Regarding adaptation, the text reaffirms the doubling of climate finance by developed countries by 2025 and emphasizes the importance of inclusive and locally led actions. But in concrete terms, only early warning and climate observing systems are suggested. The need to establish a global goal on adaptation is re-emphasized, stressing that it would help redirect climate finance by developed countries. A final outcome on the goal is expected at COP28, and the Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program will continue working on the global goal on adaptation throughout the next year. Even though the 1.5 degree limit remains the overall target of mitigation, observers express huge frustration about unclarities in the draft document. Yabzano, head of delegation from Greenpeace International, said the COP presidency pushes the pedal to the metal on the highway to climate hell. Criticism arose around the missing phase out or phase down of all fossil fuels as proposed by certain countries like India. Canada announced to block a phase down of all fossils anyway. The latest draft reaffirms the need for a rapid, deep, and sustained reduction of greenhouse gases. Emissions, including the reduction of global carbon dioxide emissions by 45% by 2030 relative to the 2010 level. The mitigation work program has cleared some brackets in the draft, but remains unclear about crucial aspects such as the scope and the timeline, and even whether the mitigation work program should be implemented next year or later. Regarding loss and damage, the cover decision welcomes the new agenda item but does not make any reference to a deal. The reason might be that there is no deal yet. Parties are still negotiating a funding arrangement or at least a process to get there. In the latest text, there are different options available that boil down to this. Either a new fund this year or a new fund maybe next year, or just vague new and enhanced funding arrangements next year. The European Union has shown willingness to bridge the gap in a bargain, pushing for ambition. Last night, US lead negotiator Frans Timmermans presented a proposal for a L&D response fund, mobilizing finance from a broader donor base to specifically the most vulnerable. Timmermans says innovative sources of funding will be needed. Observers assume that he means emerging economies like China or India. According to Timmermans, the proposal would be part of a mosaic of solutions. Debt relief, shipping, aviation and fossil fuel taxes to finance a loss and damage fund sound like promises to follow up on. In response to this compromise, it seems that other negotiations items in deadlock have made some progress as well. With the draft, the parties also recognize contributions of non-party to enhance climate action. They name indigenous peoples, local communities, cities and civil society, women, children and youth. Especially people with disabilities gained a voice at this year's climate summit. They had an official space together, and the next step would be a designed constituency to the UNFCCC. Parties are encouraged to include young representatives and negotiators into their national delegations so that youth does not only has a seat at the table but a vote in the decisions. Altogether, the draft decisions of the COP will have to be refined in many aspects. We expect the discussion to carry on to the closing plenary at the weekend. Egypt won't bring the highly needed breakthrough without genuine commitment by all parties, but we saw great commitment of many activities and countries uniting for a climate-just future.
After this brief overview, we can now dive deeper into the COP and pass the microphone on to activists on the ground.
Hey everybody, this is Zakira Bakhshi. I'm a global ambassador at Youth for Nature and I'm a social and climate advocate from Afghanistan. I studied law and political science at Yale University in the United States. I've been working as social and climate advocate since the last 2 years. Back in Afghanistan, I had an organization called Act for Nature, and our primary goal was to raise climate awareness in schools and universities, because in Afghanistan things are so complicated. People do not know what is climate change and how it is affecting their lives, while Afghanistan is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. We started with climate awareness in schools and universities. We had wall painting programs, we had tree planting programs, we had plastic cleanups all across the city. This was a way that I got connected to Youth for Nature, which is a global non-profit organization that is working on youth capacity building. I got connected with this organization, and thanks to that, here right now I'm at COP and I have the bet to be a participant here. While coming to COP, definitely I've learned so many things from COP, and one of the great aspects of COP is that you will get connected to a lot of people, a lot of wonderful people like who are thinking about the things that you're thinking about, all like-minded people, and all this wonderful community is something that you can use later on. But when I came to COP, one thing that I really struggled, one thing that I found is to what extent my community, my nation, and my country is underrepresented. When I came to this place, the first day I do remember when I had a walk all around this blue zone with one of my colleagues. I feel so weird. I was happy, I'm sure, but I was also like feeling so sad. Deep inside, there was something that was killing me. There was nobody from my country. There was no pavilion from my country. It means that you are going to realize that nobody is recognizing you, and you are being so underrepresented, and nobody is caring about you. Everybody was just connecting with each other. Everybody was going to their pavilions, talking to people from their own community, from their own country, speaking and communicating in their own language. But I was asking myself that where is my place to go? Although there are so many places that I can go, but I'm sure like talking to people from your country, speaking in your language is something else. I can assure you that is something else. To speak about my country, specifically the country that is being so underrepresented, Afghanistan is in the front line of climate crisis right now. Afghanistan, though, has been a marginal contributor to climate change. It is the most impacted by climate change, and also the ill-equipped, the least equipped to deal with the consequences. The recent humanitarian crisis in the country, the rising temperature is fueling environmental degradation, land deterioration. It is causing food and water insecurity, terrorism, conflict. It is only fueling them more and bringing about more catastrophes in the country. With 80% of population who are rallying to agriculture, the rising temperature, the recent humanitarian crisis after the fall of the country by Taliban, coupled with soaring inflation, drought, means that more than a quarter of the country are living under the poverty line. 95% of the people are on the verge of starvation. The economy has already collapsed, and this literally means lose of lives. But who cares? When I come to this place, people talk about equality. People talk about empowerment. People talk about developing countries and like making the negotiation table. Hey everybody, this is Akira. Catastrophes in the country. And like making the negotiation table a very inclusive table so that everybody from every part of the world can participate. But I cannot see the position of Afghanistan here, which is so sad. But things are even more getting complicated. Things are getting more complex as women in Afghanistan cannot get education. And when we talk about gender equality, when we talk about climate education, how can we have a country in the world that is not letting women and girls to get education? Afghanistan in the 21st century is the only country that do not let women and girls to get education. But when I say this to people, people say that is so sad. No, that is so fake. Because if it was said, you could have done something. You would have done something. But when I come to this place, I go everywhere. But even my country is not receiving zero to little attention, zero to little practical attention. There's no any mention of Afghanistan, or there's no any mention of Iran here. Like while everybody talks about Pakistan, while everybody talks about India, I'm not claiming that it is something bad. It just you feel so empowered. You feel so alienated. You feel so. Demoralized when you see that nobody is recognizing you, and whatever that you do is not being taken into consideration. And end of the story, what is the point of you that you're fighting a lot, you're just raising your voice, but nobody's hearing you? I think so. One of the questions that I personally am asking for myself is, United Nations, international community who are apparently really thinking about humanitarian rights, who are really thinking about women's rights, why are not they thinking about women's rights in Afghanistan? Why they prefer to remain in the sidelines instead of the front lines? Are women in Afghanistan not women, and are their rights not being counted as human rights? Like it is really unacceptable in the 21st century, while everybody, like every country, all the countries are making development and countries are going forward. We have a country that is like going back. We have a country that is losing their hope. That we have a country that is, the generations in that country are going back. Like they're losing all their hopes and all their aspirations. A part of humanity is down, but the world is silent. That really sucks. I personally feel that to achieve climate justice that everybody here at COP is talking about, to achieve climate adaptation, we need women on the negotiation table. We need women in the decision-making process. We need women on the boardrooms of business to be part of the solutions. If we want to make solutions, we need to hear the problems. And if we do not have any delegation from Afghanistan for a country like a climate-impacted country, a vulnerable country like Afghanistan, how can we make the solutions when we do not know the problems? I think to achieve climate justice, we need humanitarian rights. We need to consider humanitarian rights, and in order to consider humanitarian rights, we need to consider the women's rights. And women in Afghanistan, more than any other time in the history, need the help of international community and need the help of people. When the chaos dies down, when Afghanistan flips from the front pages, please do not look away. We, like more than any other time in the history, need your help. That's it. Thank you.
You see, that's really something else when you hear something like this directly from the ground. We want to continue with this and pass the microphone on to activists on the ground.
My name is Joshua Leshan. I come from Kenya. I'm an environmentalist and a climate change activist. I'm here to represent indigenous communities, especially the Maasai. The Maasai community is a community that is based in southern Kenya. We are nomad pastoralists. We depend on livestock for our daily keeping, for our daily upkeep. at the moment, here at COP, I came purposely to ask the world leaders to address the loss and damage. Kenya in the recent times is experiencing a lot of droughts. As the Maasai community, we are mostly affected by the droughts that's resulting from climate change. We have lost our animals. Our animals have died. You find someone that had a head of almost 1,200 cattle, but now is left with none. It's so disgusting to us, the Maasai community, because we depend on those livestock for our daily upkeep. I came to COP27 to ask the world leaders, especially the global north, to find ways and permanent solutions to address loss and damage, because the global south is feeling the impacts of climate change. However, they are contributing least to the climate change. So my urge to the world leaders is to provide like the climate finance to deal and mitigate loss and damage. As an environmentalist back in the community, we are trying to sensitize our people on how to fight the climate change. And one of the ways we are doing is planting a lot of trees. Like we do education campaigns and public barazas to educate our people on the need to plant trees and conserve the environment, conserving the existing trees and again planting many of them. Yeah, and again I can see from my own point of view, whatever I'm doing at the ground, I can see they are really appreciating. We have planted so many trees, and that I'm very much assured that in few months or few years to come, we'll have a permanent solution to the climate crisis in our country, or especially in our county where I live. The Maasai community are majorly found in southern part of Kenya, in county called Kajiado and Narok. The Maasai community got a lot of diverse cultural practices. Mostly they live in houses called the Manyata. If you visit the Manyata seems to be a stony building, but inside, when you go inside the Manyata is made out of cow dung. It's a so nice building that when you live inside, when it rains, you don't feel the rains. So they live in the Manyatas. On the food, the Maasai majorly feed on milk and meat to some extent, but those are the recent times due to the trends in technology. The Maasai as well have started to adapt the new lifestyles. Yeah, they have adopted the new food that is being provided by the government, the new foods that is available, but normally, or their cultural way of life, Maasai depends on meat and milk.
COP27 is entering its final phase. After 2 weeks of negotiations, we may ask ourselves, was the effort worth the effects? Will words be followed by deeds? We will see how many agreements will actually become a reality in the days and months ahead. And for us observers, it is important to stay active and demand accountability from all parties. The climate crisis will not be resolved by words, but by joint forces of all heroes fighting for climate justice. Hereby, the team of Climate Youth News says goodbye for this year, and thanks you for watching.